Hello! Welcome back to D&D Beyond. From Salt Bay to the Seven, from Failed Save to the Chaos Carnival, she's been telling stories that light us all on fire for years, but we have collectively declared this to be her summer. And tonight we'll remember why as we tune in to the final episode of Exandria Unlimited on Critical Role with Dungeon Master, the one and only Aabria Iyengar. Welcome!
Hi, I can never live up to that introduction, so I will be seeing myself out. Thank you so much.
You're like, gotta
I've
go.
peaked. I've got to go now. Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing? It's the day.
Thank you for having me. I am good. I cry at random intervals all the time now, so I threw on glitter to hide it. To be like, no, it's an aesthetic choice and not me being like so excited and like nostalgic and like just I'm so happy about like the build to this moment. And first of a million anecdotes. I filmed a little video that's only for myself. I will never ever like put it on socials. Right after the very last like group meeting, like hangout before we started filming way back months ago, and watched it again and was like, oh my God, I was a different person back. Like so much has changed and like all of the emotion was there. So like I keep opening and watching that, daring myself to finally not cry, and I can't do it. So that's the day I'm having. Thank you. How are you? How are you doing? What's going on?
I'm great. I am very excited. Is it like looking at like Pokemon evolutions where you're like, that's me, but now I'm this one with the electric powers?
Yes, I reached my final form of summer, and it's a lot of that like the energy of being excited to begin telling a story properly, and also having like zero idea of like what it's going to look like and where we're going to end up and what the reception's going to be like, and trying to have that like trembling lower lip of like, I hope people like it, but like even if they don't, I'm going to make something that like I'm going to be proud of forever. And like not knowing that eventually the hashtag is wild. So that was not a thing I thought about back then.
You weren't like, this will definitely happen. What are your feelings on it?
Oh man, it's incredibly cool, but it's that weird thing of like, I don't know how to engage with this without sounding like I'm completely up my own butt. So I yell it at home, especially when it gets too hot and I'm like screaming in my like not air conditioned garage, like, it's my summer, please cool down. But it's very
the
cool.
bargaining.
And yeah, right? Like, who do I talk to about this? Spider Queen? Melora? Other god? I'm so here to make a bargain. I have warlock energy. Like, I will sell my soul to not sweat constantly.
That's a fantastic like origin for a character. And speaking of, I'm just curious, what is the Aabria Iyengar origin story? How did you get into tabletop?
Oh my gosh. So technically my very first like tabletop RPG was like Fiasco way back in the day with like Improv Squad. Yeah, where like I've never played around a Fiasco that hasn't turned into a Coen Brothers movie, and I don't think I'm even capable of it. So it was that a bunch, and then eventually, my now husband's like board game squad was like, "Oh, hey, there's like a new edition of D&D. Like, why don't we try to play? And like, you can bring your girlfriend too." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm so excited to be here." And like, the DM was great. He was like, "Why don't you play a cleric?" And I was like, "Okay, that seems fine." I did not know about like making girlfriend the healer until later on, when I also started playing video games and was like, I see what you did. But that's fine, because I spent 2 weeks as the cleric and then promptly was like, I would like a warlock pact, please. And thank you. This makes no sense to the story, but I would like Eldritch Blast now. And very quickly realized that I was like, I'm I'm gonna like this way more than this entire group ever will, and then just ran screaming towards every RPG I could get my hands on. Oh,
And
so good.
you've played and run a bunch of different systems. And I'd
Yes.
love to do like a whole separate thing on that because I love that stuff. But out of curiosity, since we are here on D&D Beyond, what do you like
Yes.
about Dungeons and Dragons itself?
Oh my gosh. I think this scaffolding of it is so good because, yeah, like a lot of indie RPGs tend to be very like rules light, and they start approaching like improv with dice vaguely as attached. And I don't mean that as a drag or as a read, but there is something about like the strictures around D&D, like D&D specifically, that are like, here's how, like, all of these rules and the nature of the spells and the way the mechanics are built are such that it tells a very specific kind of story very well. And like hero's journey stories are like extremely codified into like western like fiction. So it makes sense to tell these sort of like high fantasy stories about like growth and power and the intersection of that. So I think that even for all of the like sort of limitations around telling stories that are inherently like brutal and violent and like have like conflict and conquest as a central tenet, I think that's still an important lens to talk about like you as a character, as a person, as a group in this moment, like you have the ability, as long as you like, if you can live long enough to see it, you will grow to become this like demigod in the world. So
Mm.
as you deal with power, as you grow into it and move through it, how does it change you and how do you change the world because of it? And like that's the thing I've always loved the most about D&D, and I think at the end of the day, that was like the story I at least wanted to begin to tell in EXU. This idea of like low level characters coming into their own power. Cause like one of the things I knew up top was that we were going to do low level because we had new players and didn't want to overwhelm them with like lists of like things that their characters could do. And knowing that we were going to be right at that level where you start to get your subclass and you start to differentiate within, like, you're not just a bard, you're like a college of swords bard, like you're not just a druid, you're a wildfire druid. What does it mean to like make the decision to become a specific kind of vector for like power and magic and martial ability in the world? And it's that idea of undifferentiated power and like deciding what you're going to do with it, that like I hope is like at least a little bit the heart of EXU, even though like no theme survives contact with the party because they're gonna do whatever they do. And but like that was like the sort of idea behind it and why I like D&D so much.
Oh, that's
Sorry, that was a very
incredible.
long answer.
That was the best answer. It's funny because we talk a lot, and I've heard many times this sort of like D&D is a game that leans toward being heroes, but you just put into words so beautifully an element I'd never really thought through. Right, this is a world where every player character could potentially someday be a level 20 player character. It's about that
Yeah.
potential is in you, no matter what you rolled up. And that's beautiful. So thank you. Now I'm having emotional moments, but I do. You also segued me beautifully into my next thing, which is I would love to hear about, especially on the day of the finale, if you're watching this on Twitch, or shortly after that, if you're watching it elsewhere. I would love to hear a little bit more about Exandria Unlimited. How did the show come
Yes.
together?
Oh my goodness. So I think I will only be able to give like the sad tiny GM answer because I know that like if you ask Marisha this, like as the creative director, she's going to have like that sort of long view of like goals and intentions, and I just know where I came into it months and months in the long ago when I remember getting a phone call from her and I was like, what's up? Because this was also like I'll give a little bit of timeline stuff. This was also around the time where I was going to be on Critter Hug, and I was like, oh, I guess it's maybe about that. And I don't who could possibly say what's going to happen here. And I remember after the phone call where she's like, why don't you come in, like do some like tests, like, and we'll just see like what the vibe is like at the table. And I was like, oh my god, who oh, okay. One, you got to say yes. Don't, are you talking? Are you breathing? Yell yes and hang up the phone, Aabria. I was like, okay, yes, good. And like hung up and realized that like at the end of the day, the truth is I started playing D&D maybe a month before Critical Role like came on the air, like back in the GNS days. So I remember sitting with my friends, being way too lazy to read the player's handbook and going, we'll just watch Critical Role and figure out how to play from them. Because who's got time to read in this economy? The worst the world will ever be, because we didn't know about 2020 yet. So I like learned to play D&D watching Critical Role, and ooh, goodbye earring.
But like
And
you and so many people, and like before there was a
yeah,
Critical Role, like there've always been a bunch of paths in. There've always been people for whom the book is the perfect and correct way to start, and there have always been people
yes,
for whom that is not true. Like the community has
exactly.
always been those groups. And sorry, that's just me being like, I love that. I love that
No,
very
you're
much.
good. And I spent a lot of time as like an Adventurers League DM also. So like I also like appreciate people who are like the rules are the rules, and like learning to conform and like figure out like the sort of puzzle of D&D. What's the most I can do given the set of constraints is a completely valid path. And like if that's how you like to play, more power to you. Clearly, if you've watched EXU, I'm a rule of cool. Like, who has time to count out squares? You're there. Do a cool thing, please. Impress me. I watch too many Fast and Furious movies to care about physics or logic. Like, let's go.
Okay, but
But
you had some fun with physics too.
oh yeah,
We'll get to
oh
that.
yeah. But yeah, all of that began with a bunch of like play tests. And I remember like the first, I was so grateful for them that I got more than one, because I remember the first time when I came and like stood and saw the DM screen and like stepped behind it. And like, I don't think I was verbal for like the first couple minutes, where I was just squeaking like, I'm here. This is stuff. Oh God. Oh God. Try to tell a story. So yeah, it all started with a bunch of like tests in the studio, and then eventually
And
met like the group that would be it, and we ran a bunch of games together. And
can I check in
yeah,
just
yeah,
quickly on when you're saying a
please
bunch of
do.
tests? I know like we're talking to a mass audience, and like we're sort of used to throwing that around in an entertainment
Oh yeah,
context. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially when we say test, we mean experiment. We mean
yes.
trying things out, not like a math test that you have to that.
Oh, that would be amazing. I'm very good at standardized tests. No, so these were just one shots that were with like different groups of people. So I came in, and it was really, really cool, because they were like, you can run whatever you want. And I was like, okay, do I like, because I have a copy of like Wild Mount, like, do I like jump into that and like try to run something from there? Or and I think this is like kind of the guiding principle for everything that I've been like a part of lately, and especially this summer, where I was like, you gotta swing big. Who knows if you get to do this thing at the end of the day? Who knows? Like, we're LA people, we're in Hollywood. Like, sometimes projects just go away. So there's no betting on getting to do the cool thing, like, and waiting and holding on to it. So like, you got to do it every time. So I wrote a unique one shot every time I showed up. And we were filming a couple times a week. And I was like, I have never dealt with this level of turnaround. So like, let's get into it. So yeah, it was just a series of one shots before we got like the final crew together and made sure that like the vibes were right at the table, because like, that's the big thing. Like, Critical Role is a bunch of friends playing at the table. And even though our like beautiful set of 7 people hadn't spent like years of friendship together, we wanted to make sure that there was like that genuine bond, and like kind of understanding people's like cadences and preferences, and everyone's just delightful. So like, it's hard to like, there were no people where I was like, I will not work with them. Like, cause that's just, I like getting along with everyone. But like, trying to pick up on each other's like wavelengths. And I think that's like, so there's a lot of like a discussion in the community about like me being extra mean to Amy. That's just because we came out of the gate and I was like, bestie. So I'm going to give her like a harder time. Like, cause even being a brand new player, you just have that sense of like, okay, I see what we're doing here. You're going to like push me as the teacher in the classroom, and I'm going to give you a hard time because you're new. And like, that's going to be our energy. And so, yeah, getting all of that stuff right up top was like the big part of all of this coming together. Not to mention like everything that like on the production side happened with like our producers, Max and Steve, and everyone. Every time they came in with like new art and like the logo and the intro as it was happening, broken in tears every time. Almost fainted when I saw the DM screen. Like, just normal nerd things to react way too strongly to.
Look, I think we all did that when we saw that intro. It incredibly beautiful. Unsurprisingly, like the level of art and craft over there. I mean, I'm highly biased, but like that just someday they won't turn into 10, and we'll be like, what happened?
Yeah,
I
like, are
maybe
you
they'll.
okay? Are you sick? Is something wrong?
I do want to talk. You brought up the other players at your table, and y'all are so good together. It's obviously a mix of established Critical Role folks and some new folks. Can you speak to putting that group together, or rather, just to like having this group at the table?
Yeah. I think it's an interesting challenge as like a DM in the gameplay side. I want to speak to that first
Yeah.
because it's always fun to like have to adjudicate between like new players who are not like immediately like they don't fall into the patterns of like here's the lingo and like lingua franca of D&D and like the patterning and generally speaking what this means. Like there has to be that extra bit of like, oh, when he asks like how are you looking in character, he's asking how many hit points do you have, do you require healing. So like getting the new players up to speed on that, while also the trick of EXU, if I can like get a little like soapboxy and hopefully pat myself on the back a little bit, is trying to make a game that is accessible to new viewers while like honors like the people who have been with CR from the start, that will get like deep lore references without locking out new players who are like, I don't get what that is. And then at the table, running a game that is both accessible to new players and chases their fun because they're not constrained by knowing the rules as Cole. So they make bigger swings and bigger choices and trying to make them feel like you are empowered to do that. And I will figure out the mechanics on how to make that work while like giving a game to established players that still feels good and honors the fact that they are like in the pocket as players. So the table was always like incredibly interesting, and not that it presents a challenge, but it's like a unique opportunity to say like, how do we make something as close to for everyone as possible? A game that is sandboxy enough and not too railroady and like kind of hopefully in the sweet spot on a lot of different Venn diagrams simultaneously. And obviously discourse can happen all over socials as to varying degrees of success of how that happened. But getting the table together was just incredibly cool. And I do want to shout out the fact that like the two new players at the table are also people of color. And I think the more like those kind of different influences and perspectives and like eyes on how fiction has like shaped and formed people given like cultural context and like sort of nerddom makes for interesting storytelling choices. Like Byrodin wouldn't have been the thing I described if Amy hadn't gone on like a long tangent to me, like to like all of us in the group when we were like hanging out about the city of Laredo, Texas, and like its like unique little monoculture. So the more you can reach out and add new people and add new viewpoints, like stories will always be richer for the new people that you brought in. And I think that's sort of the meta thing that Critical Role was trying to do by having another GM come in and say like, okay, Aabria, you're a Black woman, and how do you think about Exandria? Like, what things do you prioritize and what do you care about, and how may that differ from like the story that has been presented thus far in Tal'Dorei has been part of it. So I want to say that like the cool part is bringing in new perspectives, and the great part is just getting to play with some of the best people in the game. Like, I'm not gonna not just sit here and go like, oh man, Liam is being dramatic and I'm in the room and he's doing it at me. This is cool. Like there were so many moments where I just geeked out where I was like, oh my God, I'm here doing this with them. That's just I'm so lucky for so many reasons to get to be here now telling the story with these people, both old and new. And that includes the audience. I guess that's like another weird like part of my GMing is I grew up as a GM on stream games a lot of which have like active chat interaction. So I truly do not know how to not pay attention to the audience. I'm always hyper aware that they're there and like to treat them as like a part of the story too, hence me spiking the camera on a fairly regular basis. Like, so
that's when you stare straight down at the camera again.
yeah, when you just stare straight into the camera and go, did you hear what they just said? What are they doing? They're gonna put the crown on? I dare them to. I hope they do it. Like, yeah. So I've always considered the audience part of the table too.
You have an amazing table. Your new players are fabulous, so that works out. Like, born for D&D. Are you kidding?
Oh
and of
Amy,
course,
and then Anj coming in. Oh my God! Like, I could. Sorry, we don't have enough time for this, but I could scream about like Robbie and Amy coming in like hearts full and just ready to tell interesting stories, and then Anj coming in with the extra difficulty of like you're going to jump into the middle of this and like be the pivot that like changes the story and like sends it towards its end game. You down? And she just came in and was like, I've got like her energy from moment one. I was like, oh, I'm not worried. Like I wasn't worried before. But the moment she just slipped in and was like, hey, I've got the group brain cell. Like, here we go. It's such a nice feeling as a DM to go like, okay, the pressure's not on me to drive this forward. I don't have to like coddle and sort of like bring the player in and like make sure the group accept she was fine from jump. And that's just so impressive and so hard to do, especially when you're filming in advance and you don't get to see the episodes before. Like she had to come in kind of blind on what was going on and then just make big choices. And she's a legend for that. They all are.
Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna pepper in. We probably won't get to a lot of questions, but I'm spotting a couple that would fit in nicely. So let's talk about what you plan and then what happens. Stormqueen asks, how much of your plans did you have to adjust due to the group's play style or their choices?
Ooh, I am actually an over planner. So there were a lot of plot hooks that always existed in every direction, so that there was always something for them to chase. But like, even with a lot of planning in advance, and like also keep in mind, like I knew this campaign was like months in the making, so I had lots of time to plan a lot of roads and hopefully cover large swaths of territory if like the player zagged. But I'm an improviser at heart, so at the end of the day I was like, I dare you to like make up a new choice and we'll figure it out. I think the only time they ever really got me off guard was when they decided to go to it was like minute one where they're like, we go to get brunch, and I was like, did I not write the name of a local tavern? Is that the one thing I didn't do? Oh, cool. Make it up on the spot. And then came up with like the goofiest name ever, the Third Wing. But
you didn't account for brunch.
I didn't. That's on me. I didn't realize they were gonna wake up with a lot of like college kid energy. Like, we had a rager last night. We would like to go get some eggs. I'm like, oh,
did they ever?
Okay. I didn't know what we were doing here. That's on me. Here we go. But they change all the time, and the nice thing is being able to like flow and change with it. So yeah, if they had done more Posca stuff, we would have stayed in Amon. Like they didn't, so we kept moving forward. And I think that's like the fun thing, is not having to stay on the road and like limited to like a specific narrative set. So the answer is a lot all the time, and it was great.
So while you were ready for all the twists and turns, you did have a bunch of great stuff planted in your pocket. So let's talk about Posca. Let's talk about new cities, new areas. What were some themes that you wanted to bring forward, or some things you were excited for in adding your pieces of world building?
Yeah, sweet. So I really liked the idea, and that was kind of like the meta campaign hope, was that I would get to spend some time in a like well-established location, Amon, and like show my spin on it. A like hopefully like referenced but not overly explored area, which ended up being by Roden. And then I always wanted to make a new area on the map. Like that's just like the cool thing of like, if I can change the world in a fundamental way and like leave my mark on it, that's like the best of all possible worlds. So yeah, Posca and the entire Posca line. It was like, how do I change Iman? And this is where like the poli sci in me kind of comes out, where it was like, let's talk about like how societies change over time. And normally it's a bit more slow going, but in a world where like violent change can and does happen all the time, when bottleneck events like, a bunch of chromatic dragons like show up, how does a society like react and change in like the heart of that while still being sort of fundamentally human? And I was like, yeah, if a bunch of rich people got kicked out of their house because Thordak nested up in the Cloud Top district, where did all those rich people go? So now here's like this cool area, and it's described in some of the other texts as like the upper slums is like kind of like a hip, fun, young area. I was like, so there's Brooklyn here in Amman, and now we're gonna there's no way I'm not gonna talk about this. Like, let's talk about gentrification a little bit. And like, yeah, it's all through the lens of like a thieves guild. And yeah, if Posca was completely good, she would have been Robin Hood and not the head of a thieves guild. So let's talk about like moral grayness and like, once again, that sort of like meta idea of like power and culpability and where you like find yourself. I always wanted to challenge the players to decide where they stand, and like hopefully not do too much preachiness of like, you should have chosen the good thing. Like, you choose what you choose. It's not about things being kind of capital G good or capital E evil. It's just what you do with it. And it's the same thing with deities. Like, we had spoilers for up to episode 7, a good, a bad, and a neutral deity. So like Melora's there, the Spider Queen's there, and the Observer, who's a lesser deity of my own design, that's neutral. So like, there's balance, and you just decide where you fall in, and all paths are valid. You just have to choose, is I think the big sort of like element I wanted to lean into. So a lot of the storylines, stuff that they like intersected with and then moved forward past, like, we're all around that. And that's the same thing with the vestige. Like, it is clearly an evil vestige, but it is a source of power. So how do you let it shape you, and what do you do with it becomes like a big idea across the campaign.
And
No
side note, that's on
spoilers.
me. I promised you I was going to give a spoiler warning at the top of the stream, and then forgot to do that. So we are discussing
all
events
good.
up through episode 7, just because that is where we are at the present. Thank you if you're watching. All right, let's see. We've talked a little bit about the show and how it comes together, what you were going for with the themes. I'm so glad that you brought up Amy's thread on Laredo, because it blew my mind as a player, as a DM person, to just draw on it's fantastic inspiration. Just like looking at Brooklyn and how things change over time, drawing insights from life is not anachronistic. It's brilliant, creative, fertile fuel, because that is how beings interact with each other over time. Now I'm on a soapbox. I'm sorry, but I love that very much. It's so rich. It's so beautiful. It's so smart. And if anybody missed that thread, the discussion you guys had off stream, I'm assuming some version of that is what she then posted to explain the inspirations for Laredo and the pageant and all of it.
Absolutely. And yeah, like kind of like digging into that just a little bit more. Byrodin is also one of those interesting, like, it's a place that's been referenced, but we didn't see too much of, that absolutely got dunked on by Thordak. So this bottleneck event that kills like most of the people and like leaves everything in shambles. Like, what's the society that grows out of that? Like, it's got to be intensely like not militaristic, but like militia inspired, because they know that they live too far from Amon. Like, this is where we're like get into like the way kingdoms work, and like kingdoms fall when it takes more than 2 weeks for a person to go from one end to the other, because like that's like the limit of like what someone can reasonably defend from a center of power. So if you look at like how big the Roman Empire got, like 2 weeks in any direction is about the limit before things start to break. And like literally looking at Amon and going like, if Amon's the center of Taldore, Byrodin's at the edge. So they can't look to Amon for like being saved if another big bad thing comes. So they have to build their own culture of like being able to take care of themselves. And I think when you're sort of like off in the corner, I'm an only child, and I developed a bunch of really weird habits. I eat Reese's cups really weird because like I never had to eat them around other people. Like, I'm just a weird kid in the corner that like eats all the edges and then peels off the chocolate and then eats the peanut butter at the end like a goblin. But that idea of like when other people aren't around, you can develop weird habits that seem totally fine because it's just you. So yeah, I think like the love of like military strength and like armor and defense turns into a pageant when you hang out by yourself for 30 years and you're like, yeah, it's not just armor, but like let's have like a tulle skirt. We should all get on a stage and show each other, hey, look, welcome to the Gem of Byrodin pageant. Like, what a weird world can develop. So, yeah, that was
That is an
my
incredible
design principle.
example of like the perfectly clear logical line between eating a Reese's by yourself and armor pageant is
Look,
I'm going to be
story
reflecting on
comes
for a
from
while.
everywhere.
So the story also goes many interesting places, and I want to open this up. Do you have a favorite fight or set piece, or do you want to tell us about that cube?
The finale set piece is my favorite, and you'll see.
Oh,
This was like the one thing where I was like, I hope I get this question because my answer is going to be so petulant that like the cube was the thing that like kind of I dreamed about because it was such a weird concept. I was like, I have no idea if this can be made. My art skills ended with like the popsicle stick mission, California mission I had to make in the fourth grade, like every other kid from California. I do not have the manual dexterity to build this. So, like, is this a thing that can even happen? And then getting Knox to come in and build exactly what I wanted and make it even cooler than I thought was like amazing and a gift. So like that set piece, I think, is the coolest thing that I've ever gotten to like realize in a game. But as far as an encounter, tonight, tonight is like I'm so hyped. I hope people like it. If they don't, I don't care. I had so much fun doing it. Like it was to the point where like I don't think you can see it in the actual shots, but I had like curtaining around me. Like it's a social distance set, but like just to make sure that no one could look in my direction and catch any of the stuff I was working with. So it was like extra, it was just so big and cool and so fun. And I loved it so much. So I can't wait for people to see it.
oh, that's beautiful. That's incredible. I feel like you've just maybe potentially promised me you have to come back to talk to us about it sometime in the future. I'm just saying.
Don't threaten me with a good time. I will talk to you about anything whenever. You're just an awesome hang and I treasure you.
Thank you so much. That's so kind. I did accidentally fished for that compliment and it came out real beautiful.
Look, we just keep the net in the water and we see what we get. You're good.
Can we talk a little bit about watching the show roll out? The reception, the like response from fans. I know I've seen some incredible art, some music.
There's a folk song that came out today that made me scream cry at like 9:45 in the morning. So that was very cool. Sorry, continue to finish.
Yeah. Essentially, what are there anything else that has stood out about that experience of like watching this go out into the world and be received?
Yeah. I've thankfully been a part of like cool games where like people have made fan art and like cosplayed as stuff, but never at this level. And from the very beginning, I think I yeah, like I had a tweet very early on about a wish for the sort of like, haha, as I come in and like I sit and like kick all of these forever DMs out of their chairs to let them go be a player. I'm like, my greatest hope is that you all get to experience like the love and energy of a fandom that can like be very about your character and like map like art and the stories and songs onto it. There is also something very just sort of mind blowing about people like when you're the DM about people saying like I hear what you said about the world, I heard what you described, and I get it, and here's my version of it that is has melted me into a puddle so many times. Sorry, as you can just hear like garden sounds around me. Um, so many times because like, yeah, when people like make art and I'm like, that's exactly the way I saw it. And I don't think I'd described it quite this way, but like, wow, you get it. You get the heart and the feeling of it. And like, especially for characters like Posca that are like incredibly close to my heart. Like the first time I saw art of Posca, I was like, okay, it's gonna be like this for the whole time, I guess. Cool. So every piece I see, I freak out about. I have it saved in a little Dropbox folder that I just like look at, and the fan response has been so cool, and I am so grateful. And even like the discourse around it, like obviously I understand that I'm not Matt Mercer, and that's fine. I'm not trying to mimic him. That like even in the talking about it, the refining of ideas, the understanding of like the way I tell stories, even when compared to the way other GMs tell stories, I think it's all net good because the more discussion around it, the more it sort of validates this as like a type of storytelling. And you can have preferences. People can have favorite directors as long as you understand that like if you only ever watched movies that one director made, you would get bored over time. So yeah, I love all of it. The positive, the like neutral, and even some of the negative stuff. Like, because it's just all talk and discussion. That means you care enough to have an opinion and voice it. So I'm very grateful for that. And it's very, very cool.
Oh, that's beautiful. I let's see. I feel like somebody said a great question of someone somewhere was telling me how much they love their DM style because it helped you. Oh, there we go. Stretch in someone. Huge fan of your DM style. Has really helped me as a DM relax a lot. I loved the rerolls you allowed to happen to let story progress or something cool happen. How do you weigh up a story point potentially failing versus letting it happen and be awesome?
Oh, yeah. I think at the end of the day, like the big rule here is if it's information that is critical for the plot to move forward, you have to make sure the players have a vector through which to get it. And kind of reaching out to a little bit of a note that I like saw a lot in the community where like people would I would ask for like a skill check, and despite a low roll give information. I think the thing that like needs to be understood was there was information that was always going to be given regardless. It was just the role was more about like what do you get on top of that, because
Mm-hmm.
like yeah, if you're a character that's proficient in insight, like a low, like if you roll a, like usually natural ones are like a comedic thing has happened that has like caused you to like catastrophically fail. But if you roll like a 2 or 3 on the dice, you're still the person that is good at insight. Maybe you're just not quite getting exactly what this person like is throwing down. So I believe in like floors of information and then sort
Mm-hmm.
of weighing how much to offer on top of that. Um, yeah, it's hard to find the balance, and I think, figuring out when to just let a thing happen has like, for me at least, becomes more of a vibe of, like, generally speaking, there's a cadence, there's like a BPM. I don't know how to explain this other than, like, there's, like, a beats per minute where games feel like a song to me. And I can feel when things are getting a little too intense and staying a little too intense for too long, or beginning to like peter out and drag. So I will tend to be a little more effusive with gifts if I feel like the dice or some other aspect of the story is causing things to flag a little bit, and she'll be like, all right, here's a little boost, let's keep going, like the party has to stay like in this like hype range, and we'll make sure that like the mechanics don't get in the way of the like good time.
And I will say this might not have been like a game breaking moment, but I personally loved in the impersonating a waiter exchange where like you were absolutely gonna let that fail had there not been a
Yes.
natural 20 coming like down the pike. And it was beautiful to watch because it was just like this could really go either way. Like you better
Yes.
really pull this off, and then the dice were there. Mhm.
I love when dice decide that they're like, excuse me, I'm also here and would love to tell a story. Like natural ones and natural 20s are amazing to me because like we're in this world where magic is real and we're telling these like heroic stories where like you can't be worried about like if crazy coincidences happen. Like this is a like mythic tale about a group of people doing a crazy thing at a time. So coincidences happen, like wild failures and wild successes that defy logic and like the natural progression of things happen all the time. So let's honor that. And when your giant crocodile rolls a natural one and gets flipped by 100-pound warlock, you just have to let it happen. And then it becomes the fun game of explaining and like being a part of the world and the universe, explaining, yes, of course that happened. And here's why it's good. And here's how it was always part of my plan, as you furiously change your notes.
And that's why we play, right?
Yeah, that's the fun.
All right, let's see. We do have, you don't have to, I'm just going to preface these questions by saying you are allowed to pass on any of these questions. But Dark of Nate asks, will Nipnopes become canon in Exandria? I would say they already have.
There are, okay, so context. Nipnopes are a improvised bird from Pirates of Salt Bay that they're like parrots, but they are very nipple specific as far as like what the sweetmeats are and what they aim for. It was a weird thing that explained a weird thing from a game, and they started off as a joke, and then it was just like, well, they are now part of the natural fauna of Salt Marsh. So there are a lot of like goofy references to other games I've run or played in that were peppered into the notes of Exandria. And was there a universe in which a Nipnope made an appearance? Yes, but I will not explain the circumstances under which it would have arisen. There are like lots of little like weird things in there that I think like someone, this can be like if like redditors get very excited and want to like fine tooth comb, but like there are references to Salt Marsh in there. Like I love creating a larger cinematic universe for all of my stuff. But no, at no point did they go after the pepperoni birds. They did not encounter them.
All right. Stretch and someone says, oh, that was the one I just read. Ukulita Kyun? Sorry, I'm getting your name wrong. Big fan of your DMing style, Aabria. Throughout your run in EXU, you insist on players not apologizing when saying or trying something. Are there other things you do consciously to foster a welcoming vibe? And did you start doing that right away as a beginner DM, or did it come progressively?
To answer the second part first, because that's what I remember, because my brain drifts away at times. I spent a lot of years as a tutor, and I've worked with kids and coached kids in sports a lot. So I think that has always been a part of my DM style, because that is just part of my teaching style in general, which is like, hey, don't worry about it. Like the reason I'm here at all, whether it's as a tutor to try to explain like a mathematical proof to you, or as a DM who like understands the rules better than new players, is like, that's for me to worry about. Like, you do not have to worry about like adding emotional or like manual labor to me in this moment, because that's the whole point. I want you to feel empowered. And especially with as much as like like my desire has always been to bring more people into the community that like didn't necessarily think that like this kind of storytelling or gameplay was for them, that a lot of it comes with anxieties around like, oh, I don't know high fantasy super well, can I do this? I'm like, you can do whatever you want and we'll make it work. So I think anything sort of that you clock that I do to that end is intentional, because I want to make sure people feel as like empowered and like protected and cared for across like the incredibly vulnerable act of trying to tell a story and like let out a little part of yourself to a group as possible. And I don't remember the first part of the question, so I don't know how to answer it.
No, you pretty much covered it. It was, are there other things that are kind of in that toolkit to help foster the welcoming vibe?
Oh, I think just lots of open communication. Like, I do play with safety tools. Like, you don't tend to see them that much. Like, on camera, but there's also lots of like discussions beforehand and questions during the game. Like I do occasionally like check in, like, are you saying that above game? Are you good? During the game. And then like lots of aftercare to just make sure like, hey, that was a very heavy moment. And sometimes you're at the table with very good actors and you're like, when you cry, I don't know if you're this is for your consideration level material or if you're having a moment right now. So let's talk about it for a little bit. So lots of that too, and just making sure everyone feels like cared for. I think that's the thing. I like your mom friend graduated from cleric to DM of like, I just want to take care of my party and tell a good story and be as emotionally intense as they want to be, and then know that they can like walk away from the table and like kind of leave it all on the field.
That's beautiful. And you all will be leaving it on the field as of the finale tonight, which is just we do
So
have a
emotional.
standard D&D Beyond question that we have to hit you with. It's
Yeah.
very important and it's very
Yes.
serious.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite dinosaur?
Favorite dinosaur is an allosaur for sure. Super easy.
That was
I
so
love
rhymy.
them. They're just like, I don't know. They're like ratchet Tyrannosaurus Rexes. Like they just feel like they're a little lighter, so they get into more fights. So that's my favorite. Love them. Love everything about them. There is no nerd in the world that plays D&D now that didn't have a dinosaur phase as a kid, and I will die by that. Like that was the first fandom, y'all. That was the first one.
And hey, if you haven't had yours yet, maybe it's still coming. Watch
It's
out.
coming.
The warning signs
It's not
include
too
being into
late.
D&D.
Yep. Yep.
Let's see. We kind of covered this one. Drunkle Vlad wanted to know what was your first thought when the croc flip was mentioned. You don't have to share that one on stream, but
Oh no, this is great because as it's been noted, I have zero poker face. So if you're wondering what my first thought is, you heard it and I went, absolutely not. Just no, that's nothing. And you will have to prove it to me that that's real. You will not fool me into doing a goofy thing. And my favorite part was like Ashley or Amy saying it and just staring me dead in the face. And I was like, I don't trust you. You lie to me constantly. And then watching Ashley like jump onto her
I don't
phone.
have an answer for that.
Oh, calm down, phone. We're fine. Sorry,
your
Apple
phone got
Watch.
excited.
Yeah, right. But like Ashley jumped on her phone and I saw her doing it. I was like, no, just please just tell me it's not real. It's real. Okay. We've now spent time and attention on this. And like, I don't know if you feel the same way, but like as a DM, I feel like I'm constantly living in bullet time. So like a thing that takes like 5 to 10 seconds, like watching it back felt like 20 minutes in time. And I was like, we spent too much time on this. I must allow it. Okay, please roll to flip the crocodile. Even though it's a
It was
fake
you
creature.
sensing how cool it was, too.
Yeah, of course, that's hilarious. I'm like, if you pull this off, that's the greatest thing I've ever heard of. If you don't, I'm gonna have a crocodile smush you. This is a win-win for your girl. Let's give it a shot. But it's so fun. It's so good. And it literally made me laugh so hard that like there was way more to that encounter. We were just done with it though. I was like, no, we're good. What am I gonna do? Introduce some other schmucks that's not gonna feel cool at this moment? Like,
And the
shout out to like,
crocodilettes.
yeah. And we're good here. Crocodile Rock ended it. You have solved my puzzle. Let's go.
Let's see. We did have a few questions in advance. The one was, is it true you are trying to take over the world?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Good.
Oh yeah,
Keep
that's
it up.
easy. I thought that was a little more apparent, but I am.
Do you have an all-time favorite class you've played?
Ooh, man, I feel like I will always default to Warlock because I love Warlocks because they don't get very much. You have to like be smart about like the build and like what Eldritch invocations you pick and like what your subclass and like packed boon are to try to build this thing that will eventually become an Eldritch Blast like button spam, but feels so good and interesting both like in combat and out of it. Like love a charisma caster. I've been having so much fun with paladins lately. I think I slept on them a little too long. Also, they're very good when you're like, I just want to win the fight. violently. And putting together a level 20 paladin for a couple of B-Daves, like charity games, I was like, this feels great. This feels great and I enjoy it. I did 180 points of damage. Thank you. Oh my goodness. So, charisma casters always. Yeah.
Sorry, there's something very beautiful about Warlock main unexpectedly discovering they love Paladin. Like, that's a beautiful story.
I was like, wait a second. Hitting things with a stick is incredibly cathartic. I would like to do more. I'm going to put a smite on it. Ha-ha.
Speaking of doing more, tonight may be the finale of Exandria Unlimited, and I may personally be hoping that there's just 7 more years of that coming somewhere. I mean,
I live inside of Critical Role right now. I'm actually inside Crit Role right now. So I live there. I'll just sneak on the camera one day. Yeah.
But you have many, many other amazing things going on and coming up. Can you tell us a little bit about what's coming down the pike, some of which we already know about? The 7?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So the 7 premieres next Wednesday. It's on Dimension 20, so it's on dropout.tv. And we're back in D&D again, because the game that I ran for them was in a different system. But yeah, it's a table. Everyone at the table is like femme, and we're playing a group of adventurers that are known in the world of Spire, which is Brendan's world, as the 7 Maidens. Like, they were all captured in high school and like chained at the front of like a dragon emperor's like cave in order to like summon power. And they like sort of took it, they took their origin story, reclaimed it, and now are a bunch of like super badass warriors. And I play Antiope Jones, who the only bit of information known about her going in, because some of the characters have appeared in seasons of Fantasy High, mine has not. My bit of information was there was a vote amongst the 7 Maidens to vote for the leader, and Antiope won by 6 votes, and the 7th vote was Antiope's going, I categorically refuse to lead. And I was like, haha, I will base an entire character around that personality trait. So she's very much like the unassuming, like, hey, we're getting into a fight. And everyone kind of does like turn and looks at her, and she's like, don't ask me. Please do not. I'm just gonna shoot my bow. Like, why are we looking at me? No. I'm not even that kind of ranger. I hate being outside. So it's very good and very fun. And oh God, I cannot wait for people to see it. Like, it's just pure comedy. And I have to hype up that like Becca Scott has a scene which is the funniest thing I have ever seen in an RPG in my entire life. Like, it's almost the funniest thing I've ever seen, and that's the end of the sentence. So I'm so excited for people to see this and get super stoked. And like, in that sort of like, let's lean into the summer of Aabria hashtag, there's some more stuff coming down the pipeline. Like, my summer's not over. I just can't talk about everything yet. So like, EXU and Misfits and Magic were like what people began the summer under, but like that's not it, and we keep going. It's a world domination plot, and there are others on the list, like Arya Stark, with my
in the middle of that
things.
In the middle of that, you like just swung by D&D Live to run a Feywild adventure for professional wrestlers. So, just in your spare time.
It was so cool. It was so wild. And like, I hope Wizards of the Coast was fine. They're like, here's a little campaign thing about like the wilds beyond the Witchlight if you want to run something. I'm like, I'm gonna take the 2 things that I like and sprint to heaven with them. And these wrestlers are as chaotic as I am, so I hope you don't mind. It's gonna get real weird. I'm gonna get weird with the mermaid and the Jabberwock. Anyway, bye. And it was just so much fun. And yeah, this has just been like the coolest summer ever. I don't know.
Good.
So there's more stuff coming, so keep an eye out. But this is just, golly.
And of course, cool. As of this morning, we actually announced that D&D Beyond, we're having our big anniversary week next week, and you're going to come play with us on Tuesday.
I am. We can talk about it? Okay, cool. I'll be here on
sorry.
Tuesday. I'm so excited. No, that's not on you. I never know when I can talk about a thing and like have to ask like 3 times. I'm like, my biggest fear is being the Tom Holland in any group of just like accidentally spoiling stuff. And I'm like, just be very quiet until you can say anything at all. Do you understand that, like, as sad as I am about tonight being the finale of EXU, I will be so relieved in 6 hours when I know that I didn't spoil anything because I've been afraid of it for months.
Well, we can't wait. We are also excited to get the finale in our eyeballs and our hearts, where it will lodge forever. If the past 7 episodes have been any indication, do you have any final thoughts that you would want to share or comments as you're looking back at nearly but not quite the end of that particular journey?
Ooh, I'm gonna say an action item that I hope people take away from it. That like you should always feel free to bend the form. Like the player's handbook is a set of guidelines and rules, but you can use them to tell the kind of story you want to tell, change the setting, change the way a spell works or a mechanic is, add something, describe something for the camera that like your players didn't directly interact with, but give them a little bit of information or context that will help them tell the story better. Stingers are fun. Whatever. I love Marvel movies. I love a stinger. Give them a little tease of something that sort of happens outside of the world, like add diegetic music, do whatever it takes to make the story feel like your own. I appreciate everything everyone said about like loving my DM style. And I hope that the thing that you take away is I want you to love your DM style if you're a DM. So if there's something that you take from me, please do it with my blessing. I am a mixture of all of my favorite DMs in the world. Like I am a little Satine, a little Matt, a little Brennan, a little Amy Vorpal. I just keep grabbing it and use it and refine it and figure out what the best version of yourself is and what makes your table have fun and what allows you to have fun too. Never forget about your fun as a DM because that's also very important. So you don't get burned out. Have a good time too. And yeah, that's my wish for anyone to take anything away from this.
Find your version of being behind the screen. Be the best GM you can be. You heard it from Aabria Iyengar, and it is her summer canonically.
It's
so
my
you have to
summer.
do it. We're just going to keep the summer going forever. Side note: we've abolished
Yeah.
other seasons.
I am actively sweating in my chair right now, so the idea of an endless summer does make me die inside, but like conceptually I love it.
You may
In
categorically
actual-
refuse to enforce Ultimate Summer, but we're all going to vote for it
Yes.
anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you. Where can people find you to follow on more of these adventures?
Yes. You can follow me on social media at Quiddie, Quiddie. It is a weird name, but I love it. Yeah, just follow me there.
Thank you so much for joining us today on D&D Beyond. And everybody, a big break a leg for tonight for the finale of Exandria Unlimited.
I'm going to kill them all. It's going to be so nice.